everyone, welcome to another Book Review Wednesday, and today I thought it would be interesting to briefly address a sort of a series of books and start with this week discussing the first book, and then next week the second book, and then the following week the third book. So the first book of this series, I guess you could say, it's basically his Dark Materials series, but basically what it is called within the United States, as the title of the first book, is The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman. Now, the interesting thing about this book is that it has a lot of really complex and I think interesting ideas within it. This series primarily focuses on this idea of creating a world that's very fantasy oriented, while at the same time addressing things that could be associated with sort of our world, so to speak. And I think it's a very interesting sort of take and interpretation of a fantasy world. So without further ado, let me about sort of the series and give you kind of some background a little bit in regards to how the world functions, and then kind of go with you through the plot and the characters. Now, this world that exists within this book, The Golden Compass, and the whole series, his Dark Materials, basically centers around a world that is dominated by a theocratic international organization called Magisterium, and basically they have their own set of rules and things like that. So they really do enforce those rules and kind of don't encourage free-flowing ideas, so to speak, and like to keep things orderly, and you know, they don't try to really basically rock the boat, because they live in that kind of a society. But also there's also something also really important to note that is sort of kind of fundamental to understanding the series, and that is that basically within this world, individual souls naturally exist outside the body in the form of daemons. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I'm sorry if I'm not. And daemons are basically animals. And basically daemons can change based upon how old somebody is. So for example, every person has a daemon with them constantly. It's pretty much like it's like having a pet. It's like your best friend, man's best friend, so to speak, with you constantly. And apparently, I think they can, and again, they can communicate with one another, the daemons and the humans. But basically, the daemons do change animals when the person or individual is a child or has not reached puberty yet, and once the child reaches puberty, then the animal takes one particular form and then stays there. And again, it's sort of like, you know, they're attached to the hip in the sense that, you know, it's basically a part of them. So basically they function as kind of one unit, even though they're separated. It's very strange, but it's also very, I think, a very cute idea, especially if you're trying to sort of get the child audience invested. But basically that's pretty much how the world kind of functions. Uh, but as far as the story is concerned, it primarily centers around this one character named Lyra Beloqua, and she's taken care of by a master, um, or by the master of the Jordan College. So she kind of, you know, has really no direction sort of in life in the beginning because she's just kind of, she's sort of treated as like an orphan, and she just kind of wanders about and has her own set of curiosity, and she's just kind of um she's just kind of out there, and while at the same time not really having seeming to seem she doesn't seem like she knows sort of her purpose, especially considering the fact that again she is an orphan and she's kind of has no people to look up to that are in her family. So basically, she ends up being given away. Uh, basically the master ends up giving her away to this woman named Miss Coulter. And basically, once Lyra is given away, that's pretty much where the journey sort of begins, because this is sort of supposed to be sort of a fantasy journey epic, so to speak. And then Lyra ends up going through a bunch of different plot points and ends up ultimately discovering um, the truth behind everything that sort of surrounds her life. Also, it should be emphasized that her uncle, named Lord Asriel, or is he her uncle? That's that is the question. But basically, he really does end up playing an important role within this plot too, because he's trying to sort of accomplish and discover something that is, supposed to be kind of new and revolutionary, but the people that control the world that they live in don't want him to do something like that because it goes against their authority. And so yeah, it's sort of playing with the ideas of science and religion, like it's like how the old it's basically the best comparison that I can make to a real life scenario and to this world, and to how um, Lord Asriel uh, is sort of um, uh, basically to provide you an analogy of how Lord Asriel is used within the story. Um, he's like the person, the one scientist who discovered that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. And my lord, the name of that scientist is just escaping me right now. But I remember that scientist in particular was put under sort of house arrest for kind of claiming these things. I believe it must have been Galileo. I believe it was Galileo, the name. I apologize. I just had a brain. Uh, uh, I'm just horrible with names. Okay, but just the one scientist, again, he was put under house arrest because he claimed the notion that the sun is the center of the universe and not the earth. And people who were really religious back then, which was the majority, got really mad because they thought that the earth was the center of the universe because God made the earth and made humans. Therefore, we must be the center of the universe. We must be the central importance to the world, or to the universe, basically. Uh, and yeah, that's kind of how, again, Lord Asriel is sort of treated when it comes to presenting sort of his scientific or kind of just his discoveries, they sort of reject him, and don't want him really actually going out and figuring things out, because once again, it's kind of like, we don't want you to know the truth, so we can maintain some kind of level of control over you. And I think that's really what was at the heart of this story, when it comes to that notion. Um, and also, it is important to note that there is a concept within this story that they title dust. And dust ends up meaning and dust ends up meaning a variety of different things. Um, but it does really play a central sort of role to the plot. But I don't really want to give away what it ultimately represents, because again, it sort of plays a significant role, and it does really impact the plot. So I don't really want to give away as to what it is, but I throwing it out there just so you know that dust plays a central role. And the simplest way I can explain it is that it's particles, um, and these particles ultimately end up leading to things. So I don't want to give that aspect away, but important to note that dust, as they call it, plays a role in this story. And again, there's a lot of twists and turns, and that's why I really don't want to give too much of this plot away. I think what I've summarized pretty much uh, tells you what to sort of expect. It also should be noted too that there are these gobblers um, within the book that they reference who kidnap kids and use them for their experiments and things like that. This ultimately comes into play again within this grand plot, and I don't really want to give that away because that's very important to this series of books. But you sort of see how, again, it's all about trying to maintain that level of control over people, and that's really what the book series does focus on. And as far as, again, themes are concerned, again, it's really a battle sort of the between the oppressors and the oppressed, so to speak, or basically people who want to withhold from truth in order to maintain a level of control, and those who want to be sort of liberated. So again, it is that battle that sort of plays out within this story. And really, the journey does center around Lyra. She is our main character, and she does seem to have this reasonable way of approaching things at times. And she also seems to be fairly strong-willed throughout. I mean, this young girl seems to maintain a certain level of of resilience, I guess you could say, because she really tries to ultimately figure out what's right. And I think that's something that's definitely good for a character to have, to figure out really who is on your side. Um, and again, she still has that sort of innocence within her, because again, it's sort of expressed within the book that she kind of is transitioning into that puberty process. So you kind of see too, again, and it's probably sort of an analogy too for, like going into adulthood, going into like basically kind of like losing your innocence, so to speak, um, and kind of just discovering truth, um, instead of believing in a perfect world, so to speak, or living in a perfect world, excuse me. So I think that also is something that's, I think, fundamental to sort of her character, because she is in that transitionary stage. And I think that really plays a role when you look at how the religious oppressors basically want to keep that level of probably um, innocence, and they don't want to you know, let people have their freedom. Um, and they don't seem to know how to handle authority. And they do it and ultimately end up doing it in a very oppressive way. So I think that's just something that's very important to consider when it comes to her character, because she is in that transitionary period um, within herself as well as sort of her surroundings, because she is really figuring out what's real and who is in the right and who is in the wrong. Basically, um, I think really those are all of the things that I think I could cover when it comes to this story. I think this was a little bit more difficult for me to explain because there's a lot of different plot points and there's a lot of and there's all these different little complexities to it. There's tons of other characters, from witches to a polar bear, like you can see from the cover. And, there's just a lot to this story, but I ultimately don't want to give that away because I think that's really um, spoiling what ultimately ends up occurring. But the best way I can describe it is just Lyra going on this journey, and while at the same time coming across a lot of characters and sort of figuring out where she plays into this sort of battle that's going on between people like her uncle and the people that basically rule their world. But yeah, I think that's really all I can say about the Golden Compass. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you in the next video. And I'll actually be doing Thursday's video today so I can be caught up, because tomorrow I am going to be too busy. But yeah, until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.